Tao Meeting Archives, February 22nd, 2016. Spring is Coming by Bill Bunting.
Okay, everyone, let's go ahead and do the meeting beginning ritual. 起立，面向佛堂，参加三鞠躬，一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，参加各位顶传师一鞠躬，开班一鞠躬，请坐下。Please be seated.
Here in scenic Indiana, we've finally had a couple of days that have actually been up in the 60s, which is wonderful. Winter up here tends to be pretty cold and pretty bleak. And I'm not really a big winter person. I really am not. I am a warm weather person in my heart. But yet, without the changes, I wouldn't have this talk to give every year. And I do so love the spring, and it's coming. This year is going to be a little more special for me than perhaps the last couple. But there are some common things that I tend to draw attention to whenever I talk about any kind of a change, and particularly with something that's cyclical and readily observable, like the changing of the seasons. Some of those things are in the foregoing list here. The first one is that change is a constant, and it is. If we don't know or learn anything else, we know that no matter what we do, no matter where we are, no matter who we are, change is going to happen in our lives, like it or not, and it's going to happen pretty much all the time. Along with that, the passage of time in our lives is a constant. There's no getting around the passage of time. We all get older, things around us age, and with the passage of time also comes change. One of the things that I say to illustrate the transient nature of this existence is that if you want to know how impermanent this life is, think about all of the things that you hold dear right now, and then think about the condition they're going to be in 50 years from now. In 50 years, the house that I'm living in will not look anything probably like it does now. I probably won't be living in it then. In 50 years, I probably won't be living. And so, in a very brief description, we can kind of very readily see that time alters everything, and everything ages. But along with that, and the longer I'm around, the more I notice this, all things are essentially cyclical in nature. And that's for me, is a comforting thing to know, and something from which I draw a certain amount of reassurance, because just as the seasons change, and we see, spring followed by summer, by fall, by winter, by spring, I believe that the cycle of birth and death and rebirth is one of those cyclical things that is not undone in the universe. And of course, like everything else in life, some folks see some changes as more favorable than others, and everybody has their own perspective. Those lessons and generalities don't just apply to my favorite cyclical topic of spring, but they apply very directly to living as well. We all get older. All of us perceive the changes that happen in our lives in more or less of a positive light, and very frequently in any group of people, the same change can be perceived differently, just because different people see the same thing from different perspectives. But either way, Whether we view change as positive or negative or none of the above, the change itself is still a constant. But when I think about the spring, the thing I think about more than anything is renewal and rebirth. And for me at the moment, that's a topic that's near and dear to my heart. One that's at the top of my speaking list, to be sure, but definitely so this year. I look outside, I see the robins returning, I see the trees starting to bud. I feel the warmth of a beautiful 60-degree day up here with no snow on the ground. And I watch that warmth from the sun bring about that wonderful renewed growth and the kind of the rebirth of the plants and animals around the house here. And I realize that, although I see winter is fairly bleak, it's also fairly necessary. But that cycle of birth and death and rebirth is visible all around us and is essential. But in that cycle for us, there's hope. And I realize that there are some folks who don't necessarily share my view there. There are many who believe that death is a final thing. I tend to look at it in the perspective of what I can observe and what I believe. And really that's all I can offer you. The reason that these lessons from the changing seasons are so important to me this year is because just a little less than a month ago, I survived my third heart attack, actually an episode of atrial fibrillation. It's a heart arrhythmia. And due to that, kind of got reminded of exactly how fragile and how short and how precious a gift this life is. It's a reminder that we have a responsibility to ourselves and to others in the choices that we make and in our code of conduct and ethics and integrity. And we have an obligation to ourselves and to others for spiritual evolution and growth, and to set the right example for other people so that those who have the affinity for the Tao teachings can discover them and put them to work in their lives as well. And as I contemplate those things, I look back across 50 some odd years with more than a couple of regrets for some of my past life, but more these days now than ever with really some wonderful memories of a life pretty well lived and very happily served. I have wonderful children who actually still want to have something to do with me, a wife who's loved me for going on 20 years and vice versa, and a life where hopefully the good and positive things that I do far outweigh the mistakes that I make, and where my example shines a light on the path for others to follow. I'm not going to be the person who ultimately judges how well I did or didn't do. And make no mistake, for each of us in life, we're going to be judged by the history, by the legacy that our lives leave behind us. Even while we're still hanging around this place, we have a pretty good idea, I guess, of our intentions and our behavior. But most of the time, we don't find out from other people how we were perceived because they tell everybody but us. So it's important to keep those lessons close to the heart and mind, and to remember them and to follow them. I guess the big thing that comes out of all of those contemplations and reflections is that with change comes choices. And I think that's true no matter where the change originates or what the change is. We choose how we will respond to the events that happen in our lives. There are a lot of folks who swear up and down that they're the victims of cruel fate, or that predestination or preordination in some way has influenced where they wind up and what they do. I'm a firm believer in accountability and free choice. I think we all have a life mission, a destiny, if you will, that we're supposed to fulfill, things we're supposed to do. But I think it's up to us to find the way in which to fulfill that destiny or that mission, or to reject it altogether, I guess. And in so doing, perhaps alter the fabric of our karma until we finally get it right. At the end of the day, we choose which path we're going to follow. And sometimes those choices aren't year by year. Sometimes they're day by day. Sometimes moment by moment, depending on the situations at work in our lives. But in those moments, in those days, in those years, the choice remains the same. And the choice is always ours. We choose how our relationships will evolve and progress over time. We choose how we will respond to other people and the vagaries and foibles of their emotional states and mental states and the things that agitate them. We're going to choose how we react, both to those who are more spiritually evolved than ourselves and to those who are less spiritually evolved than ourselves. In some cases, those interactions will be very pleasant. In some cases, they'll be very unpleasant. But in either case, we choose. And so I guess what I'd leave you with on this topic is that, while nature may bring change to us, change brings choice to us. And choice is ours to exercise as we see fit. I would like to choose to act wisely. I spent a fair amount of time, particularly when I was in the hospital, because nobody ever sleeps in a hospital. It just doesn't happen. I was in there for 2.5 days, and they woke me up every 3 hours to give me my sleeping pill. You just gotta love it. About the various groups of people that Lao-Tzu speaks of when he talks about the 3 groups of 3 of 9 and the 1 in 10. Those are choices as well. We can become followers of life, followers of death, or those who are followers of life but moving towards death. We can choose to hide from the joys and wonders of life in the hopes that we might protect ourselves from some kind of catastrophe. We can choose to recklessly abandon all care and meet our demise base jumping off a cliff someplace or something. Or perhaps we can, skip being the 3 of 9 and try to be the 1 in 10 who actually lives life with an appropriate amount of calculated risk and an awful lot of fun, but without meeting an untimely end, jumping out of a perfectly good airplane or cliff diving into a shark-filled body of salt water or some other equally risky maneuver. Am I saying we shouldn't have fun? No. I love fun. And despite the fact that I've had a couple of cardiac events in my life, I'm still fixing to be out there doing what I do. I'm not giving up the Tai Chi school. I'm not giving up camping, hiking, running around, not giving up any of it. I am going to be just a bit more careful in the future. Have an aversion to bleeding to death in general, and they keep my blood pretty thin these days. But that notwithstanding, I still intend to have fun. I intend to have it skillfully, and I intend to be around here hopefully for a very long time, continuing to talk about these experiences and these little events from my life in the hopes that somewhere down the line somebody might find it to be useful or helpful to them, to understand that real people walk this path, and real people deal with the issues and the weirdness of life and all of the situations that beset us, and attempt to make sense out of the ancient teachings so that we can apply them to the modern day with a certain measure of success and skill. Hopefully over the years I'll get good enough at this that maybe none of us will have to wonder whether or not I got it right, but in the meantime you all get to share not only the successes but the failures and the missteps and everything that goes along with them, in the hopes that maybe by watching me run into a tree or two, you guys can miss them. And I do look at this stuff with a certain amount of tongue-in-cheek humor. I truly believe that not having a sense of humor is probably one of the largest human failings there can ever be. When we take ourselves too doggone seriously, then there's no room for anything but perfection, and we're doomed to fail. I don't have a problem with laughing at myself anymore, and I certainly don't have a problem with other people getting a good-natured chuckle at some of the things that I talk about. Not going to suggest that any of you have a heart attack in order to master the Tao teachings. That's kind of an extreme activity. But since it's part of my existence, it's also part of my path and part of what we talk about. So anyway, to kind of tie it up a bit, I always look forward to the changing seasons, and I look at the change of each season as a time for some introspection and reflection. But I got to tell you, I look at the coming of spring every year with joy and with anticipation and with gratitude that I've been allowed to live to see another spring. And this winter, I actually had some doubt as to whether or not that was going to be the case. And so for me to be sitting here today talking to you with the sun shining down and the temperatures up in the middle 50s and the robins running around out in the backyard and listening to the kids play, I'm reminded of how sweet and how wonderful and how precious this life is, and how fragile it can be, and how thankful I am to be allowed to see another spring come into my life. I think taking time to renew the spirit and the mind is one of the most worthwhile activities a human being can undertake. It's been the process of education and learning and introspection and reflection and meditation that have brought me from where I started this path many years ago, as Derek, I'm sure, remembers, to where we are now. And where we are now is vastly different than where we were, and will be vastly different than where we wind up. And that's okay. The other thing that I'd suggest to you is always try to be the 1 in 10. The 3 groups of 3 of 9, they all have their fun, but they all flame out too quickly. And it could be said that none of them actually make it through life skillfully. The 1 in 10 who understands and masters these teachings, that person has the genuine lasting joy and satisfaction of a life skillfully lived, and I can't imagine a better memory to leave this life with when it comes time to do that. Thank you all very much for letting me share with you, and as always, it is a joy and a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
I want to just mention that what Bill has talked about, heart attack is certainly very serious. It's certainly no joking matter, and knows that better than anyone. The insights, the clarity that Bill has presented today, I think is something that we should all become very aware of, whether or not we're suffering from some sort of cardiac condition. Having said that, there was something that was discussed in a previous Sunday. What we usually do is that after these meetings, we reconvene in a conference room to have our lunch together and to have continuing discussions. So that day I'm remembering that we were also talking about life and death. And what I had mentioned is very similar to what Bill said, is that, the latest book that I have out there, The Tao of Happiness, the last part of it is all about life and death. The Chinese talk about Zhuangzi. They often say Zhuangzi, 生死观, the last three characters meaning his view on life and death. So he's very well known for that. And therefore, in the very last part of the book, I devoted the entire section to what he thinks about this big, weighty topic, life and death. It starts out, so that section has like 5 different chapters. It starts out with the death of Zhuangzi's wife. And then it goes into the chapter right after that is the death of Zhuangzi's friend. And then the chapter after that, the death of Zhuangzi. So his wife dies, his friend dies, he dies. And then a couple more chapters to finish that off, and ending with the signature story, the most important story from Zhuangzi, which is the story of the butterfly transformation. Now, back to the first chapter, the death of the wife. So in that story, and for those of you who haven't read it, I'll try to not spoil the ending for you too much. Hence, the wife dies at the end of that story. But what Zhuangzi said was that, he began with a lot of grief. He was overwhelmed with grief. But as he thought about it more, he realized that we have this misconception about someone losing his life or her life. When in reality, if you think about all the time prior to someone's birth, when that person, that specific incarnation was not alive, was not present, did not exist. So the more accurate way to think of it is to see the life that we do have as being not necessarily ours to keep, but ours on loan. It's something that we borrow temporarily. We borrow this life for 70 years, 80 years, 90 years, whatever that lifespan is, but at some point, it's like a book that I borrow from the library, I have to return it. If I live a healthy life, maybe that's like me renewing my books at the library. I get to keep it for a longer period of time. But that's going to come up. There comes a time when I can no longer renew my books, and I have to return the books that I had borrowed in order to keep the system going. So this life that I thought that I had, not being something that I own, but only something that I borrow, returning it is inevitable. And as Bill was talking about just now, he compares it to the transition, to the changing of seasons. It's a perfectly natural thing. So when we see it that way, death becomes something that comes into sharper focus, something that comes into greater clarity, and that we can accept it on its own terms. Then in our lunchtime discussion, it was mentioned that when people have this harrowing brush with mortality, such as what Bill had, they gain spiritual clarity. And when they emerge from the experience, when they recover from the experience, nearly dying, they think about how precious everything is. They think about how, I'm living on borrowed time. They literally say that. I have to cherish every single day that I have now because I could have so easily died, when I was going through that experience. That's great. And let's take it just one step further. integrate what Zhuangzi has said, even if you don't go through that experience of nearly dying, we're all living on borrowed time. Even if we've never caught a cold or flu in our lives, we're still living on borrowed time. That's what Zhuangzi was saying. That's the deeper level. So, I'm very much appreciative of Bill relating his experience. It's something that I can definitely relate to, not personally, but having experienced family members, loved ones going through that experience, seeing how they are, seeing how they react, it's definitely something that I think about all the time, and I'm very happy to have written those chapters in the latest book in the hopes that it will be something that other people can draw strength from. At the very end of it, it's actually toward the end of that particular section, that's actually what I would recommend for anyone who is in grief counseling over the death of a loved one. You know, sometimes it is so horrible that you don't know that you will ever be okay again, that you will never be functional again. That's what I went through, by the way, about 25 years ago. I really felt that having lost my brother in a car crash, that there was no way that I could function ever again. So it took quite a while to emerge from that experience, but then it became the catalyst for me to look deeper into life's big questions, which, you know, one way or another brings all of us together here and now in this moment. So it happened for a reason. When I'm looking at it in human terms, living day to day, living moment to moment, you know, I lose sight of the connection. But if I were to zoom back, look at my life in total, you know, 25 years is not such a long time. I can see a very clear connection between that moment and today, this moment right here and now. Let's just go ahead and do the meeting ending ritual, everybody. 起立，面向佛堂，持架三鞠躬，一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，持架各位点传是一鞠躬，结班一鞠躬。
Join the Tao meeting live to participate in the questions and commentary. For more information, go to http://taoism.net/tao/connect-online.